There are two types of people in every room. The ones who walk in and immediately start reading the environment, adjusting, shrinking, performing, trying to figure out how to be accepted. And the ones who walk in and the environment adjusts to them. You've felt the difference. You've been in the presence of someone who carries themselves in a way that makes other people naturally pay attention. They're not necessarily the loudest, not always the most attractive, not always the most successful on paper, but something about them commands the room without demanding it. People listen when they speak. People move when they need space. People want to be close to them without fully understanding why. That's not charisma. That's not luck. That's not something you're born with or not born with. That is a psychological orientation toward the world, a specific way of thinking, moving, and relating to power that can be understood, studied, and built. It has a name, and today we're getting into exactly what it is, where it comes from, and how the people who have it actually think. If this is something you've been looking for, subscribe. This channel goes deep into the psychology most people never get taught. Like this video, drop a comment below. Do you think power is something you're born with or something you build? And hit like so more people find this. Now let's get into it. First, let's clear up what this is not. The king mindset is not about dominating other people. It's not about arrogance. It's not about walking around with an inflated sense of your own importance or treating other people as beneath you. That is not power. That is insecurity wearing an expensive costume. Real power, psychological power, is much quieter than that and much more stable. At its foundation, the king mindset is this: an unshakable internal sense of worth that does not depend on external validation to survive. It doesn't need the approval of the room to feel legitimate. It doesn't need the title, the praise, the recognition, or the permission. It exists independently of all of those things. And because it exists independently, it cannot be taken away by any of them either. Psychologists describe this as having a strong internal locus of control. The belief that your life, your outcomes, your direction are primarily determined by you, not by circumstances, not by other people's opinions, not by luck or timing or what someone else decides to give you. People with a weak internal locus of control are constantly in reaction mode. Something good happens and they feel great. Something bad happens and they fall apart. Someone approves of them and they feel worthy. Someone criticizes them and they question everything. Their emotional state is essentially being run by whatever is happening outside them. They have no stable center. The world is the remote control, and they are the TV. The king mindset is the opposite of this. It is the decision, and it is a decision, to be the source of your own authority. Here is the part nobody talks about. Most people were not raised into this mindset. They were raised out of it. Think about what the first years of life actually teach most people about power. You learn that your worth is conditional, that love and approval arrive when you perform correctly and withdraw when you don't. You learn to read the room, to adjust your behavior based on how other people are responding to you. You learn that other people's emotions are your responsibility, that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth, that being liked is safer than being real. These are not small lessons. These are the foundational beliefs that most people carry into adulthood completely unconsciously. And they produce a specific psychological posture. Head slightly down, voice that rises at the end of statements like they're questions. Constant low-level monitoring of how other people are reacting. The reflexive need to explain yourself, justify yourself, make yourself smaller so other people feel comfortable. This is not weakness of character. This is conditioning, installed so early and so consistently that most people don't even recognize it as a pattern. They just think this is who they are. The king mindset begins with recognizing that it isn't, that what feels like your personality is often just a survival strategy you developed as a child that you never updated. One of the most visible expressions of the king mindset is presence. And presence is more psychological than physical. Most people are not fully in the room when they're in the room. They are partially in the room and partially inside their own head, running commentary on how they're coming across, worrying about what people think, rehearsing what to say next, managing their own anxiety. This internal noise is visible, not in an obvious way, but people feel it. It reads as a kind of restlessness, a lack of groundedness, a subtle signal that this person is not fully at ease with themselves. Genuine presence is what happens when that internal noise quiets down. When a person is so settled in themselves that they don't need to manage the impression they're making. They're not performing, they're just there, fully. And that quality, that stillness inside activity, is one of the most compelling things one human being can project to another. Research on charisma and social influence consistently identifies this quality as the core variable. Not looks, not status, not even verbal intelligence. The people who have the strongest effect on others are the people who appear most at ease with themselves. Because ease signals safety, and people are drawn toward what feels safe. You cannot manufacture this. You can only develop it. And you develop it by repeatedly choosing not to abandon yourself, your values, your pace, your truth, in order to manage other people's comfort. This is where the mindset is most tested and most visible. Low-level power responds to disrespect with either aggression or collapse. Either the reaction is immediate and disproportionate because the ego is fragile and needs to defend itself loudly, or there is no reaction at all, just silent absorption because confrontation feels too dangerous. Neither of these is power. One is a child throwing a tantrum. The other is a person who has been trained to accept whatever is given to them. The king mindset responds to disrespect from a completely different place. There is no panic, no immediate escalation, no need to win the moment. What there is instead is a calm, clear communication of where the line is, stated once, without apology, without over-explanation, and then absolute consistency in enforcing it. This works psychologically because it communicates something critical, that the person's sense of self is not threatened by the disrespect. They don't need to scream because they're not scared. They don't need to collapse because their worth isn't on the table. The boundary comes not from anger, but from such a settled sense of self that the violation is simply not acceptable. Period. Psychologists call this non-reactive firmness, and it is one of the most powerful interpersonal signals a person can send. It says, I know who I am. You cannot destabilize that, and I don't need to prove it to you. Here is the piece that the internet consistently skips over when it talks about mindset. Because it's not exciting, it doesn't make a good highlight clip. Real psychological power is built in private, in the decisions nobody sees, in whether you do the thing you said you would do when no one is watching and nothing is forcing you to, in whether you tell the truth when lying would be easier, in whether you hold your standard when lowering it would be more comfortable. Every time you keep a private commitment to yourself, about yourself, you are depositing something into your own sense of integrity. And integrity in the psychological sense means wholeness, being the same person in private that you are in public, having your actions match your values, not performing a version of yourself for an audience and collapsing into a different one when the audience is gone. People who lack this wholeness feel it. They carry a low-level discomfort with themselves that they can't quite name, a vague sense that they are not quite what they present to the world. And that discomfort makes genuine confidence impossible, because somewhere underneath, they know the performance doesn't match the reality. The king mindset is not a presentation. It is built from the inside out. From thousands of small private decisions that gradually accumulate into a person who doesn't need to perform power because they have actually developed it. Here is the thing that surprises most people when they actually start living this. The less you need other people's approval, the more naturally you receive it. The less you chase status, the more presence you carry. The less you try to control outcomes, the more influence you actually have. This is not a trick, it's just psychology. People are drawn to those who don't need them. Trust is given most easily to those who don't demand it. Respect follows those who don't require it as a condition of showing up. The king mindset is ultimately not about power over other people. It is about power over the one thing you actually control: yourself, your responses, your standards, your direction, your sense of who you are regardless of what the room decides. That is the only power that is real, and it is available to anyone willing to do the quiet, unglamorous, daily work of actually becoming it. You don't need the world to hand it to you. You never did. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of how people think, lead, and carry themselves. The next video is going to show you exactly why most people unconsciously shrink themselves in rooms where they should be standing tall, and how to stop doing it permanently. You'll want that one.